بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا Muhammad wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last time we started this discussion about knowledge, ignorance, doubt, conjecture, and delusion, and how this aligns with making sure that the fatwa and the rulings that we see scholars sharing must align with textual compliancy issues, as well as take into account the reality of the situation that we're in. It's called تخريج المناط وتحقيق المناط. Get to that. We'll talk about our course maybe on إفتاء in the future on fatwa. قال الإمام الحرمين والعلم الضروري ما لا يقع على النظر واستدلال كالعلم الواقعي بإحدى الحواس الخمس التي هي السمع والبصر والشم والذوق واللمس. He says, rahimahullah, that knowledge that does not require reasoning or inference means knowledge which is necessary. Necessary knowledge. What do scholars mean by ضروري؟ يعني لا يفتقر إلى استدلال ولا الاحتياج ولا استحتاج. What doesn't need me to ask for evidence. Like I don't go to someone and say, like, what's the evidence that you're here? They're right in front of me. Or what's the evidence that the sky is above me? لا يحتاج إلى الدليل. So that's called necessary knowledge. Sheikh, he says, related to the five senses, although now there's going to be discussions around it, especially with AI and everything that's happening, right? Mass transmission of tawatur. And it's interesting now, we may say that tawatur is stronger than the five senses. That's a longer discussion. Badihatu al-aqlu, self-evident axioms, like half of 150. Here's some examples. Fire is hot. The Quran exists through tawatur. The whole is greater than its part. This is axiomatic. Contradictions cannot both be true. Logical necessity. So the last two are related to the rational sciences, again, which are very important in Islam, very important to study for students of knowledge, people interested in serious religious vocation. Very important. All right. But what he's given you here are these examples of doruri. Number one, five senses, fire is hot. What keeps doing this, man? Number two, mass transmission. Mass transmission. Tawatur from the word witr. Witr means to follow. Watara in the Quran, we send messengers watara, one after the other. That's why you call it salatu witr, because it follows everything. So tawatur means to follow. Badihatu al-aqli means what's self-evident to the mind. The whole is greater than the part. Contradictions cannot be true. Both be true. Ijtima' naqidin muhad. The next type of knowledge he talks about is acquired knowledge. وَأَمَّا الْعِلْمُ الْمُكْتَسَبِ. اكتساب means to work for, to acquire. فَهُوَ الْمَوْقُوفُ عَلَى النَّظْرِ وَالْإِسْتِدْلَالِ. Says that acquired knowledge, and he uses contemplation, but acquired is better, and reasoning and inference, it requires effort to attain. Right? So you're asking for evidence. You have to think about those evidence. فَاسْتِدْلَالُ وَالنَّظَرُ. So this requires contemplation, another istidlal, inference, but here means seeking evidence to lead to inference, and then systematic reasoning. And here we see the marriage between the Islamic rational sciences and studying the madhahib and studying the Islamic tradition. Most of it's written in this system. Even if someone doesn't agree with it, they have to study it to understand things correctly. So here's some examples. The world is created from observing change. The ruling that wine is prohibited derived from texts. Mathematical proofs beyond simple arithmetic. Most juristic or juridical rulings in fiqh are acquired knowledge. That's why when you're into the Azhar, it says al-fiqh min babi dhunun. That's why in Qayraween, when you walk in, you see written al-fiqh min babi dhunun. Fiqh is from acquired knowledge. What do you mean by acquired? It's not qala Allah, qala Rasulullah immediately. There's no intermediary between me and understanding the text. Qul huwallahu ahad, khalas. Prophet said, khamsu salawat, 5 prayers, khalas. I don't need anyone. But the majority of issues related to fiqh are acquired knowledge. Therefore, there has to be etiquette in discussion, in adab, and how we push academically and how we engage. Now, if you look at YouTube, you look at the chaos of how people are attacking one another over legitimate fiqh issues. But this is acquired. This is not necessary. So when it's acquired, there has to be a certain level of adab and conduct there. Doesn't mean you can't be forceful. Doesn't mean you can't be strong. Doesn't mean you can't be confident. But there's a less level of sort of aggression when it comes to these kind of things. That's the adabul ittilaf, the etiquettes of staying together. What's the significance of this to usul al-fiqh? Understanding these categories helps jurists distinguish between rulings based on certain knowledge. We can't differ. There's no wiggle room versus probabilistic. Probabilistic is a great word, reasoning. The majority of fiqh is rooted in probabilistic reasoning, but by scholars, not just by anybody, not from like John from Brooklyn or Chris from Oklahoma or, Sweet Tea from wherever, man, Mumbai. No, man, it's got to be scholarship involved here, man. Got to know, there has to be those three things: correct dalil, correct usage, scholarship. Thereby affecting the degree of obligation and the degree of interaction between scholars and the hierarchy of evidences in Islamic legal theory. So what we're talking about now is when something's ilm, when something's jahl, when something's ilm which is necessary, where something is ilm which is not necessary, that hierarchy is going to create the etiquette and the adab of differences at a scholarly level, at a community level. Look how people are fighting over things that are from the acquired knowledge. Tarawih, things like music, so many things that people are arguing. Can you use tasbih beads or not? All these things people are arguing over. Where do you put your hands in salah? Certain issues related to political theory, not all of them, but many of them. And people are destroying each other. And this is the outcome of coloniality, because colonialities, we see now what's happening in Gaza. We see what's happening to people even in the US who don't agree with the line of government. They're being destroyed, man. Islam doesn't destroy people, it builds people. He says, وَالنَّظَرُ هُوَ الْفِكْرُ فِي حَالٍ مَنْظُورٍ. What does it mean to contemplate? Contemplation on issues related to fiqh is our context. In usul, the evidences. Contemplation is thinking about the state of what is being contemplated. It's a little bit, you can lose a little bit there in the English. وَالنَّظَرُ هُوَ الْفِكْرُ فِي حَالٍ مَنْظُورِ فِي. Yani it's the ability to contemplate on something that can be contemplated. المنظور يعني اسم مفعول يعني. والاستدلال طلب الدليل, and istidlal is to seek an evidence. والدليل هو المرشد إلى المطلوب لأنه علامة عليه. كلام عظيم. And that the dalil is something that guides to al-matlub. And it's beautifully used word murshid, because irshad means guides to maslaha. Maslaha, not something mafsadah. So a dalil, if it's good, leads to goodness. Even if it's hard on us, it leads to goodness. Even if it's easy, it leads to goodness. لأنه علامة عليه, because it is a directive of what is sought, meaning the ruling. أي عليه على الحكم يعني. Key aspects of this definition: mental movement among concepts, or how you working internally. And this is why we study the rational sciences. Grammar, nahu, is the rules of speech. Aqidah is the rules of belief. Tasawwuf is the rules of the heart. And mantiq is the nahu of your mind, is the grammar of how you think Islamically. That's what Al-Akhdari says. كَنَحْوِ لِلْأَذَانِ in the Sulam. That mantiq to people is like grammar to speech. كَنَحْوِ لِئَ الْلِسَانِ عَفْوًا is rules for speech. Examine relationships between ideas. It's broader than inference because it includes all form of thinking. Inference is specific, istidlal, khas. But nadhr, am. I can think about anything without trying to find evidence for it. Contemplation is the foundation of all rational inquiry in Islam and the first step in acquiring knowledge. That's why they say, أول ما يجب على من كلف ممكنا من نذر أن يعرف الله والرسول بصفاته مما عليه نصب الآيات. And Ibn Ashir and his Murshid al-Ma'in, as we'll teach here بإذن he says what? That the first obligation, according to the majority of Ahl Sunnah, the majority of theologians, not all of Ahl Sunnah, is to think, even before Shahada. So contemplating the meanings of the Quran, seeking evidence for a specific ruling. Here we see something different. Finding the guiding proof, a dalil that establishes the ruling, arriving at the sought knowledge. So I'm thinking, pondering on the Quran, I'm looking for evidences for something. I find an evidence, then I arrive to trying to align up that evidence. What I'm seeking is the ruling. هذا مجتهد. Inference is seeking evidence. Evidence is what guides to what is sought because it is a sign of it. That's the definition I mentioned earlier. Seeking proof for a proposition. So if someone says Bitcoin's haram, that's a proposition. I have to find proof for that. Following signs to reach conclusions. Here means following the texts and nusus, wal aqwal, wal a'mal, statements and opinions and actions, and what is allowed to be an evidence to seek a conclusion. Specifically focused on establishing proof. The role of istidlal is to establish a proof with dalil. Inference is more specific than contemplation and is used to establish certainty about legal rulings or the lack thereof. What's some practical application of this? Contemplating the verse about wine, seeking evidence for prohibition, finding the explicit command to avoid it, fajtanibu, establishing the ruling of prohibition. So here you see the abstract idea, and here we see the practical application. Thinking about Quran, the verse about wine. Seeking evidence, the verse says avoid it. Finding the proof, avoid it. Arriving to sought knowledge, establishing the rule of prohibition. We're going to stop here, and next time, bidnillah, we're going to talk about levels of certainty, presumption, and doubt. Again, like, share, and let others know if you're enjoying the course. Comment as well. It helps deal with the algorithms. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them below. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.